Hello everyone, hope you're still doing well. This is the third PowerPoint for Phylum Arthropoda, so we will continue on with the arthropods. Last time we talked about the crayfish, and so this time we're going to move on to a class called ARACHNIDA. You're probably familiar with the arachnids. Most people are. These are the spiders. And spiders are very beneficial, even though there are some in this class that can be harmful, but most are beneficial. They help keep insect populations in check. They eat other insects, or they eat, a lot of times they eat insects that might be harmful to, say, crops, or let's say, I don't know, I'm thinking termites, so your house, different things like that. So they're actually, most are actually beneficial to the human race. There are 5 common characteristics of an arachnid. They have 4 pairs of walking legs, or 8 total legs. They have a cephalothorax instead of a separate head and a thorax. They have 4 pairs of simple eyes. They do not have antennae. And their respiration is done through something called book lungs. That's a new term that we haven't looked at before, so we will take a closer look at book lungs a little later. So there are 2 different types of spiders, those that spin a web and those that don't spin a web. Some spiders never spin a web. That's not part of their life cycle or what they do in life. And so let's talk specifically about those spiders that do spin a web. They create something called spider silk. That's what they use to make their web out of. And they have special glands that produce this silk. And spider silk is extremely strong and flexible. In fact, I think your book compares it to steel. It is very, very strong. If you've ever walked into a spider web, you know just how strong it can be and how sticky it can be. It's very hard to get off. So they use their webs for different things, depending upon you know, how they catch their prey or how they house themselves, that kind of thing. There are 4 different types of webs that spiders spin. They are the sheet web, the tangle web, the orb web, and the trap door. So the sheet web is basically just a long, flat, single sheet of very sticky silk. And so it really doesn't have a pattern to it in any way. It's just very flat, kind of an opaque looking web. The tangle web is a web that does not have any discernible pattern. It kind of looks like maybe the spider didn't have any specific direction in which it was going. It was just spinning silk all over the place. And so that's why they call it a tangle web, because it looks like it got completely tangled up. And then there's the orb web. That's the web that we think of when we think of a spider web. It's the one that has the geometric shapes in it. Usually they're very, very pretty, very beautiful when they're spun. They're extremely specific to the different species of spiders that are out there. So, you know, one species of spider will spin their geometric web one way and another will spin it totally different. And then the last type of web is called the trapdoor, and this is basically a trapdoor spun out of silk, and basically the spider builds or digs a hole, and somehow it entices its prey into that hole, and once the prey gets into the hole, it pulls the trapdoor over the hole and of course then has a meal. So those are the 4 different types of spider webs that a spider can produce. I gave you pictures over to the side, and I'll let you discern which one is which one. I think it's pretty easy to do that. So the major points of interest in a spider anatomy. So if you compare the anatomy of a spider to that of the crayfish, that's what we looked at last time. The biggest difference is that the spider has what we call silk glands and spinnerets, and that is what is used to help it spin a web. Spiders also have fangs that are attached to poison glands. They use them to immobilize their prey, so they bite the prey and inject poison into their prey. And once the prey is immobilized, then the spider will secrete digestive enzymes into the prey's body. And then that kind of liquefies, if you will, the body. In other words, it's called external digestion. So we are digesting the prey outside of the body of the spider, and then the spider kind of sucks up the liquefied body tissues through its mouth and then on into its digestive system. Some species of spiders that have a poison that's strong enough to actually harm humans, and we know about a few of those. They are the black widow, excuse me, and the brown recluse. And if you've never seen a bite from a black widow or a brown recluse, it's kind of a nasty bite. I believe black widows is more of a neurotoxin, where it kind of causes the nervous system to kind of shut down. And with the black widow, a lot of times you may even stop breathing, that kind of thing. With the brown recluse, it is what's called a necrotic poison. In other words, it breaks down tissue. So the bite itself may be very small, but over time it starts basically eroding away the tissue around it, and eventually you would lose, like if you were bitten on the hand or the arm, you might lose your hand or your arm due to this necrotic poison that the brown recluse has put into your body. And then spiders have, as we said before, book lungs. They do the exact same jobs as a gill or a regular lung does. Their job is to extract oxygen from air. And so the air enters the exoskeleton through the little holes in the exoskeleton called spiracles, and then it passes to the book lungs, where oxygen is absorbed by the blood and the carbon dioxide is then released back out the spiracles again. A couple of other classes of arthropods, the chilopods and the DIPLOPODA. Chilopoda are the centipedes. Centipede, of course, means 100 legs. They are carnivorous. That means they eat meat. A lot of times insects, that kind of things, or other small little animals, other insects. And they have flat bodies, and they are considered poisonous. They do have a poisonous bite. Diplopoda, which is the millipede, which means 1,000 legs. Now, they don't necessarily have 1,000 legs. It just kind of looks like they have 1,000 legs. And they are herbivorous. They just eat vegetation. And they have a round body, and they are not poisonous at all. And of course, then both of them have segments just like all other arthropods, and those segments allow for movement of the body. And then the last class in our textbook is called class INSECTA. And there are some general characteristics for class INSECTA. They have 3 pairs of walking or jumping legs. Insect legs are jointed, of course, for walking or jumping or for other activities. They could also have like pincher claws or whatever, but they have 3 pairs of legs. They usually have wings at some point in their life. They may not always keep their wings, but at some point in their life, they will probably have wings. Most of the time, they'll have 2 pairs of wings. However, there are some insects that only have 1 pair of wings. Sometimes the 2 pairs of wings are hard to identify, but typically they will have 2 pairs of wings. And then they have 1 pair of antennae and 3 segments, a head, a thorax, and an abdomen, a very distinct head, thorax, and abdomen. Back to the wings, there are 4 basic types of wings. There's a membranous wing. That means it's a wing that is just a membrane. Typically, they are see-through. You can't see them. You can see right through them, or light comes through the wing. There is a scaled wing, like in a butterfly. If you were to touch the wing on the butterfly, and little scales would come off. Then there's the leather-like wing. That would be the wing of the grasshopper. It's very leathery. And then there's the horny wing. That wing is very hard when you touch it. A lot of times it's just used for protection and not necessarily used in flight. So they would lift up the horny wing, and then there would be a pair of membranous wings underneath that. And so when we talk about the basic anatomy of an insect, it's much like the anatomy of a crayfish. They have respiration and circulation just like you do. They typically have a very elaborate system of interconnecting tubes called tracheas that allows air to come into the insect's body through the spiracles. And then they have what's called Malpighian tubules that act like kidneys that actually clean the blood of waste products. So instead of having kidneys, they have Malpighian tubules. And insects typically have both compound and simple eyes, or they can have one or the other. But typically, if they have compound eyes, they usually have a pair of simple eyes as well. And all that stimuli information feeds into the ventral nerve cord of the nervous system. And so the nerve cord runs along the belly just like the crayfish did. Their feeding habits: most insects have a mandible for chewing. If it's not a true mandible, that mandible has been formed into a mouth part that allows them to feed however else they feed. For instance, a mosquito, it's still part of it's still called a mandible, but it's been elongated and attached to other mouth parts in order to create this straw-like mouth part. So depending upon what they eat determines what their mandible looks like. Food enters the mouth and mixes with saliva, and that saliva helps break down the food, and then it passes into the esophagus to the crop, and the crop is just a storage, if you will, for the food. Then when it's time for the food to be digested, it moves to the gizzard, and that's where you get the breakdown of the food. It's kind of like the teeth, if you will, because most insects won't have teeth. And then the gizzard empties into the stomach. And here is where you mix the food with the digestive enzymes from the gland that feeds into the stomach, called the gastric ceca. Then if there's any undigested food, that passes into the intestine and the rectum, and then out of the body through the anus. Reproduction and development in insects is a little bit different than in crayfish. Although females receive sperm from the male during mating season and they store it just like the crayfish do, insects then go through either one of two types of development, either complete metamorphosis or incomplete metamorphosis. And complete metamorphosis just means they go through 4 stages, and incomplete means they go through 3 stages. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't complete a cycle. It's just there's one less cycle for them to go through, if you will. Okay. And then there are a few orders of the class Insecta that you need to kind of, I guess you could say, memorize what they are and what kinds of insects fall into these classes. There is the order Lepidoptera, which is the butterfly and the moths. The order Hymenoptera, which is ants, bees, and wasps. The order Coleoptera, which is the beetles. The order Diptera, flies, gnats, and mosquitoes. And then the order Orthoptera, which is grasshoppers and crickets. So if you will turn over to page 389, experiment 12.2, it's going to ask you to put those pictures into one of these class orders that we just talked about. And I would like for you to do that in your lab notebook. And then I want you to just take a stroll around your house, around your neighborhood, and see what else you can find, and just kind of jot that down in your lab notebook. See how many you can find, how many different orders you can find, or different insects that fit into these orders. So let's say you find butterflies and moths, and you find ants and bees and wasps and beetles. You see what I'm saying? You're looking for multiple different types, and see if you can find different types of flies or different types of butterflies or different types of beetles and that kind of thing, and just really kind of take a look at the world around you as to really how many insects there are in this world. So that is going to complete our chapter 12, and so we will continue on from here. I hope you have a great day.